Hello, I'm here today on behalf of Pension Web, Trustee Web, Local Authority Pension Web, to interview Nigel Waterson, Shadow Pensions Minister. Nigel, what would you say to young people entering the workplace for the first time, perhaps in their early 20s, left university, and their first encounter with the pension is the turmoil that we have around us, you know, destruction of value and the recession and all the other issues. So how could you give them some encouragement if their confidence has been knocked by what they see?
Well, I think the first thing we've got to get across to them is that they are routinely going to live into their 80s and 90s. So they're going to need more money in retirement than any previous generation because they're going to be in retirement a lot longer. We need to restore their confidence in the whole system. I agree with that. But I think we've got to make it more attractive because I think people forget about personal accounts. So just because you've got auto-enrolment doesn't mean to say you don't have to sell the concept. You know, you don't want some bloke in a suit going on the TV and saying this is government-backed and it's a good thing to do. You know, it's got to appeal. And that's why we're looking at trying to build flexibilities into the whole system of pensions. We're looking at the American 401ks where people can get access, early access to their funds. And I think for young people who've perhaps got a student loan to pay off, worried about buying their first flat, you know, the possibility of being able to draw down some of their pension savings for, say, a deposit on a flat or something is attractive. Perhaps working in some ability to pay off some of the student loan, whatever it may be. I think anything that's building in flexibility and simplicity to the system is worth considering. And at the other end of the scale, I mean, it's bad enough telling young people they should be locking their money up for 40 years, but then at the end of it saying they've got to buy an annuity, whether they want to or not, and whether it's a good deal or not at the time. We're looking at scrapping the compulsory annuitisation rule, giving people more flexibility as to how they treat their pension pot, and perhaps even just leaving it to their children. That's one possibility. And I think it's all about really trying to get away from the word pensions and more into lifetime savings. That's really what we're talking about, because people can see that the money they're putting in is not just there for when they're old, but can be used for other purposes as well. I think that's one of the key things to getting young people back into the savings habit. I do have to say, though, that once the turmoil has receded a bit, we're bound to be saving more as a country than we have been. I mean, the savings ratio has collapsed in this country since 1997. It became far easier to borrow than to save, but I think there will be, whether we like it or not, whether we want it or not, and we certainly do, I think people will be saving more of their money. And I think it's important we ensure a reasonable proportion of that is directed into saving for retirement.
Okay, can I pick up on the point you made about America? Is there perhaps also something to learn from Australia? In that part of the world, they've gone a long way to getting engagement right across the age spectrum. They don't call it pensions for a start, they call it super or superannuation. But have you been looking at their experience in formulating your views?
A bit. My impression is, of course, they have straight compulsion, as I understand it, which we don't and we wouldn't go for. There is some evidence that what's happened in Australia has really moved savings from one part of the system to another. I don't think there's a lot of evidence it's increased the level of savings dramatically. And I think personal accounts in this country would be a failure if they didn't increase not just the number of savers, but the amount of savings. We've looked perhaps rather more closely at the experience of New Zealand and the Kiwi Saver scheme and how that's going. And there are some lessons I think we could learn there. I mean, again, this is a different scenario. You can't immediately export these ideas from one country to another without changes. But again, that's worth further study, I think.
One way where you could make significant improvements is the use of language. That's what the Australians have found, and that was my point by calling it super. For short of superannuation, but certainly moving away from the word pension, which has all sorts of emotive connotations. They've made a significant contribution to increasing people's engagement. So how about using some more powerful language over here?
Well, I think personal accounts is a move forward from the language used in the Turner report. I mean, so, you know, the sense of I think the Americans have done well by creating a sense of people having their own individual accounts for pensions, and personal, you know, it does have a certain appeal. I think the Kiwi Saver thing in New Zealand is quite a good term. I mean, there was some talk about calling this the Brit Saver, which I wouldn't rule out going back to. I think the whole concept of pensions does put some young people off, I think, particularly. I mean, somebody once said that everyone wants to become old, but nobody wants to be old, and I think there's a lot of truth in that. And it's rather similar to the, why people don't do their will. It's, because they don't want to think about, that event. And perhaps the same applies to getting old and reliant on others to some extent. I think there's a huge scope, though, for sort of jazzing up the concept of lifetime savings. We had something called the LISA before the last election, which was lifetime savings accounts, which we consulted on. We might well return to that. But we just want to open up the whole concept. So instead of it's just people thinking about getting old and having to pay for the milk and the cat food or whatever, it's actually something a bit broader than that.
Good. Well, Nigel, thank you very much. It's very good of you to take time out from your busy schedule to talk to us. Nigel Waterson, Shadow Pensions Minister, thank you very much.
Thank you.